Hello, and welcome to the Lore of Braunhaven. Uh, Today we're going to close out our discussion on the village of Gnomeveiholm, and we will be discussing the Observatory. So, the Observatory is actually a massive five-story tall tower, and at the top it has a retractable roof that can then project this large brass massive brass telescope that Orwin Kindmane, the gnome, uses to observe the night sky. Now, this location, Gnomeveiholm, was not the original planned location for this observatory. They both Orwin and Scrapnose Jadefingers originally wanted it much higher in the mountains, but the the treacherous weather and terrain of the Skelos Mountains prevented them from doing that. There were blizzards and avalanches, and so they kind of retreated down the mountain a bit and selected this as probably not. I wouldn't even say it's a secondary choice. Probably a third or fourth choice. But this is where they decided to finally settle and build their tower. So the first floor is actually all made of stone. So the tower has a very solid base, and in that first floor, that the first and second floor are actually the residences. And so Orwin lives on the second floor and above the first floor. So the entire first floor is made of cobbled stone, and then above that it is a standard alpine timber and thatch, kind of a Viking style tower. And Orwin lives on the second floor, while Scrapnose has his residence on the first floor, and the two floors they share. In the first floor they share a common kitchen and dining area and a cozy little common room, and then their individual bedrooms and private spaces are separated between the floors. On the third floor, which is again all timber and thatch, the third floor is almost entirely taken up with Orwin's alchemical laboratory. And he does magical experiments of all manner. Now, Orwin, being a gnome, he is a skilled illusionist. But uh, illusion isn't really his only area of interest. And unlike most illusionists, Orwin doesn't use his illusionary magic uh, as such to deceive people or to do parlor tricks. Instead, he uses his illusionary magic almost it almost broaches upon divination because he will use an illusionary magic uh, in an attempt to kind of scry, or to mimic what something else is seeing, and then present that as an illusion so that a viewer can more easily view it in another location. It's very similar to scrying, and there is a very fine line between the two of how he is actually using his illusionary magic. But there are tons of magical experiments going on um, in the laboratory. He's got potions and wands and all manner of doodads that do various magical things. Most of them are in various states of disrepair. So he might have a wand that by itself doesn't do anything until it is joined into a brass piece that goes into the telescope, for instance. And he experiments in various ways with different alchemical concoctions and magical creations in order to increase the power of his telescope. The fourth floor is very similar to the laboratory on the third floor, but it is entirely taken up with the workshop of Scrapnose Jadefingers. Now, Scrapnose, being a Sverfneblin, is very skilled at making contraptions, gearworks, clockworks, and he has a dizzying array of small gearwork machines and clockwork automatons and several other gadgets that sit around on the various workbenches that are almost entirely covered in gears and springs, levers, you name it, and he's got it. Various tools all over the places. Now, the downside, of course, and very similar to the laboratory, well, worse than the laboratory. Number one, Scrapnose isn't really the best housekeeper, and most people that would come into the workshop would look around and be bewildered because there seems to be absolutely no organizational effort going on here. But to Scrapnose, he likes to refer to it as an organized mess. He knows where everything is, theoretically. And but he also has a very short attention span, and so he will begin working on something, and then, I mean, maybe 2-3 hours into the job, will then turn and start to work on something else. So the workshop is really filled with a bewildering array of partially finished gearworks and clockwork automatons, and so. I mean, there is a lot of potential here, but none of them are presently in any kind of working state. Now, this might make one believe that Scrapnose can't focus, but this isn't true. A lot of times he will, while working on one of these automatons or a gearwork machine, he will come to a realization or have an epiphany, if you will, of a way to make the telescope work better, and so he will then leave and go up to the final floor to tinker with the operations of the telescope. So the telescope is actually working quite well, thanks to Scrapnose. But anything else that he has kind of gets put on the side burner, and these are particularly just projects to be finished that may sit there forever. And then, of course, the fifth floor is entirely dedicated to this massive brass telescope. The roof retracts through a gearwork mechanism that you can go in and simply crank a lever, and the roof will retract into itself, almost in a accordion style. And then at the same time, it will then lever out this massive brass telescope, and there is another crank that can be turned that allows the entire roof to actually rotate. Now, of course, in order to get to the fifth floor, the entire top has to be rotated in such a way that the stairwell will line up with the door, and there is a mark on the gear that shows where that gear has to be placed in order for that alignment to occur, because one may not be completely aware because you're not seeing it from the outside. And so Scrapnose has marked on the gear where you have to place it in order for that top to be completely level with the stairwell. But this allows the roof to point that telescope in almost any direction, barring elevation, because some of the crags of the Skelos Mountains may hang over. But most of the night sky is available for them to see. And they're high enough where most of the time inclement weather doesn't prevent them from viewing the night sky. But not always. There are some storms that are bad enough that not even the telescope can broach through the cloud layer. Now, you don't actually have to look through a lens to see what this telescope is doing, because thanks to Orwin, he has come up with, using his illusionary magic, that they have polished a crystal that sits in the middle of this chamber, and it is magically connected to the telescope. So whatever the telescope is pointed at will then be projected into this crystal dome that is in the center of the chamber, allowing people to stand around it and view. And it's maybe 5 feet in diameter, and you can then look into this large brass and crystal dome and see what the telescope is pointing at. The the craftsmanship that has gone into this is quite remarkable considering how far out they are. But as I said, Orwin had originally traveled to Zlatoheim because he knew that the dwarves would be are masters of metalwork, and so they would be able to craft the parts that he needed. And then it was just simply a matter of him and Scrapnose taking the parts and getting them to the location where they were going to build it. And from there on, I mean, that was the basis for the observatory. From there on, they pretty much have crafted everything that they need themselves, usually down in the cave in Gnomeveiholm. There is part of the gnome warrens. There is a small smithy, and so they are able to hammer out some of the parts that they need, or simply construct them in Scrapnose's workshop. Some of the items are just created right there on the fourth floor, and so there's a great deal of craftsmanship that has gone into this, and it's a shame because most people don't realize that this observatory even exists. In fact, Orwin and Scrapnose really didn't make it for anybody other than themselves. And Orwin, of course, creates detailed notebooks on things that he sees. And he has come to the realization that the night sky that one views through the telescope is actually a part of the astral plane. And so he suspects that there is a much greater interaction between the prime plane and the astral plane than ever before known. And so he's on the cusp of a scientific discovery. Other magic users in the world, they can do planes travel, and planes travel is not unheard of. In fact, it is known and slightly feared because sometimes, like to the Fey realm or even to the Shadow realm, these portals can just simply open during certain times of year, and so they can be quite dangerous. But it is not known how these planes interact. They do know that they go around in an orbit around one another, but they don't know what it is that they're floating in. And Orwin is now coming to the realization that all the black that you see is actually the really the shoreline of the astral plane. There's something more further out there, and the reality is that that is true. The prime plane sits. That blackness of space eventually abates to the pinkish purplish color of the astral space, and that is the prime plane, or this particular prime plane, that these other planes of what we know of the Braunhaven world's cosmology actually rotate around it in an orbit. So that is the conclusion of our exploration of Gnomeveiholm. And next, this Thursday, we will be exploring further up the Eastern Tradeway, and we will come to the fire giant stronghold of Stromvolt and the machinations of the giant that is living there. Lord Ledsius. He is the current ruler of Stromvolt, and he's he's kind of angry. He's trying to bolster his support so that he can finally rule the Skullus Mountains for his own, and he's not doing a very good job of it. So catch us on Thursday, and thank you for watching.